So within our faith, we do have the concept of the soulmate, and that we were made as pairs, and a lot of invitations for marriage. There's verses from the Quran that are quoted that often will talk about these kind of things. But specifically, I want to talk about the challenges that people are having in this area. And I'm going to start first with just the concept of soulmate, because when it comes to maybe what a modern day concept of soulmate is, it's really, people have this vision that they're going to find this person, they're going to get married, and then everything's going to fall in place, and they'll live happily ever after. And that's where they're gravely mistaken, and they find that soon into their marriage, often within the first month, sometimes even on the honeymoon. Some researchers would say that the concept of the soulmate, by American definitions, is the single most devastating thing to marriage today. And really it's because people enter then into the marriage with this idea that this person was perfectly made for me, and so they'll know everything I need, and they'll complete me, like a line was in a movie. So, but that's a problem, because if both people are coming to marriage with that perspective, then obviously they're both trying to see what they can get out of the marriage, and it becomes very selfishly motivated. And how do I react as an individual if I feel like somebody else is being selfish? I become selfish as well. And then you start to see the divide happen in the marriage. One of the other challenges to finding a soulmate, or let's just say an appropriate spouse in the Muslim community, is the obstacles that are put in place when it comes to actually trying to find someone. And that is that the first one being, sometimes, or at first it's already hard to find someone out there, and not even just in the Muslim community, but across America, people struggle to find people for marriage. And so it doesn't make any sense to put unnecessary obstacles in place. So one of the obstacles that people put into place is they think they have this ideal candidate in their mind for what they're looking for marriage, that they've got to fit these different criteria. And people have talked about this, and it's known, but people still do it. And you'll meet people, or you'll hear about people who have rejected, they're complaining they're not married, but they've rejected 30 people that came to them that were interested in marrying them. And the other thing that happens is sometimes parents put unnecessary obstacles in place, meaning that they have certain requirements that they need to be fulfilled. So let's say if it's a Pakistani girl who wants to marry an Arab man, the parents won't agree because they want to be from the spouse to be from Pakistan. Sometimes even more specific, that they should be from their city in Syria. And so again, this is unnecessary, because if two people find each other and they're compatible, there's no reason why they shouldn't get married. So these are cultural expectations that are put on an institution that make it more complicated and make it more difficult for people to find someone who may have been a soulmate, in that somebody that they could have spent their life with. And that's kind of how I see a soulmate. It's really somebody that you are willing to work towards spending your life with. So another challenge that people face in finding a spouse nowadays in the Muslim community is the concept that, and I mentioned this earlier, but the concept that I'm going to become happy once I get married. And I can't remember who said it, but it might have been Tolstoy, but he said, marriage doesn't make you happy, it makes you married. And so when you become married, if you were an unhappy person before marriage, you will be an unhappy person in marriage. So you owe it to yourself to be in a healthy mental state before you get married. So if it means that you have some trauma in your past, then you need to address that, and you need to go seek a counselor or a therapist to try to address those issues. If you have a high level of anxiety or a high level of depression, you need to address these things. Marriage doesn't make you happy, and if anything, it makes things more challenging in your life, because as a young adult, you're used to functioning the way you are, and you're used to all of these ways in which life is supposed to happen. And then you meet somebody and they have all of their ways about how life is supposed to happen. And so it doesn't often doesn't go exactly how you want it to go, and most often it doesn't. And so really, this is why if you talk to anybody who's been married for 50 years, 30 years, what was it that made your marriage work? A lot of them will say hard work, that they really had to work at it. And this is what they mean by really kind of lowering those expectations. Okay, so the word in the Quran, one of the words in the Quran that's used to describe love between husband and wife is muwadda. And some people would describe that term as being selfless love that's given no matter what. And ultimately, that's something we all want in marriage, is that we don't want our love to be dependent on things. Well, if I am making a good living, then my wife is going to be nice to me. Or if I make my husband dinner and it tastes good, then he's going to be nice to me. We don't want love or kindness or any of those things to be dependent on what we're getting out of it. And so when it comes to our concept within our faith, you need to see it as serving your wife and your husband and your family as part of your faith, and that you're doing it because you're doing it for your Lord. And this is the right thing to do. You're doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when it comes to your interaction with your spouse and how they interact with you, we need to activate mercy. Allah shows mercy to those who show mercy. And so we need to activate that mercy within our heart and show that love in a way that doesn't make them feel like they can lose it at any moment, because then that's when the distrust starts to creep into the relationship. So in closing, when it comes to this concept of soulmate in marriage, we need to really think about it in terms of how our faith looks at the idea of the soulmate, and not how the modern definition applies it. Because soulmate really is that sometimes you're paired, and very often I find in a lot of the marriage therapy that I do, very often what I find is that people will get married and they find somebody that is that they're attracted to because of certain qualities that they have. But then once you live with those qualities, they're very testing on you, because often they're the opposite of you. So let's say if I'm kind of a fiery tempered guy and I marry a woman who's very soft-spoken and very quiet, sometimes when I meet her, that's very attractive for me because it balances me out. But then as I live with her, I may get frustrated at times that she doesn't speak up for herself, or that she lets her friends take advantage of her, and these kind of things. So sometimes the very thing that we are attracted to originally also becomes a thing that frustrates us in the marriage, and we forget about the fact that this was something that also attracted us to them. So very often when we get married and we find that soulmate, it is somebody that's very perfect for us because they balance us out. But then we got to make sure that we balance our patience as well with our expectations, so that we can see what is good in our spouse. And we need to pray for our marriage all the time, because there's so many different things that can infiltrate your marriage and that can challenge marriage, whether it's illness in the family, or children and complications with children, or in-laws, and all these things that everybody argues about at some point or another. But we need to remember that just because we're coming across complications in our marriage doesn't mean that this person is someone that was the wrong choice, or you made a huge mistake. And there are a lot of people that may describe their marriage as unhappy at one point, and then 5 years later be very happy in that marriage if you're willing to push through the difficult time. One of the things that we need to remember is that the people that are most like you in your life, both behaviorally, genetically, environmentally, are your siblings. There's nobody that's more like you, even though you may be kind of different from them. But if you think about growing up, they were the most like you, but you still fought a lot growing up, and sometimes you hated each other. So what makes you think that you're going to marry somebody who grew up sometimes in a different state or country, maybe a different culture than you, but definitely is the opposite gender of you, and all of these other differences that you have, the different family cultures that you come from, not just ethnic, that you're going to just get along and not going to dislike each other sometimes? That's just being extremely naive. So we need to go into marriage with hope. We need to manage our expectations, And we need to continue to be merciful so that when you're married for 30 years, you can look back and say, this was my soulmate. But so many people don't even give it that chance, and we owe that to ourselves to do that.